Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. In America, it's estimated that more than 30% of women have had formed trauma or abuse growing up as children. The question is how many of these women were able to heal from this very travesty thing that happened in their lives, what they can do where they can begin to live on purpose instead of by default. At least that's the aim of our guest joining us here on the program today. Shatter, Shame, and Shine is the name of her book. She is also the creator of the Change Your Aim, Change Your Life workshop, an inner life coach, mentor, and workshop leader with a passion, compassion, and effectiveness in supporting women around the world to heal their lives and fulfill their dreams, which springs from her own profound recovery from the pain of childhood sexual abuse and the effects of living by default. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Ms. Mary Alice Coleman. Mary Alice, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Oh, it's a delight to be here. Thank you, Daniel, for having me. I appreciate it.
Now, it takes a lot of courage for someone to even talk about the experiences, of course, that you've had, but even to move past that and to be successful. Tell us how this all started for you.
Well, for me personally, because of my own background in my own life, I was living by default, which you'll hear me talk about, meaning we only know what we only know. It's an unconscious incompetence. So we just live, because I grew up in an abusive household, with some aspects of love and some happiness thrown in there. I grew up and married young at 19, thinking that's what I needed to do or I should do or had to do, and I didn't realize I had a choice. Many women who suffer from trauma, and boys too, I'm not discounting the boys, it's just that my expertise is with women. And over 1 billion women on the planet are sexually abused or accosted in some way. So these girls grow up to be women like me. And when in my life I realized as a mother and in a difficult marriage, life kind of gets you. And I had to realize I had to connect the dots between my present life situation and my past. And not unlike many women, I pretended or I ignored it away, thinking that doesn't have to affect me. It affects you 24/7 whether you realize it or not. And so for me, I went through a whole process of learning what it takes to change that aspect. So over the years, I just, through therapy, which I loved, it really, really helped me. I had a great therapist, and a lot of people don't. In my practice, I found that many women are not fortunate to really be with the appropriate therapist. It's not that they're bad, they just don't know how to really deal with the pain and the trauma. And I realized there's a way to understand and really educate oneself between the brain and the mind and the soul, and to connect the dots of how the pain really penetrates life, creates shame and humiliation, thus creates a whole filter of how you see yourself in the world, thus develops a whole lot of belief systems that aren't true, and then you live that way. And you don't even know it until the pain of life gets to you.
That's for sure.
Yes. So I guess through my experience is that I developed, it came from passion of really helping others. And when I got help, that's how it started. And I was asked to help other women.
Now, I bet it must have been surprising for you, Mary Alice, to realize as you were able to come to terms and to grow through the pain and, of course, the suffering that comes from having an experience that you had, to grow through that and realize that you can thrive, that life can be very enjoyable and very colorful. And a lot of people don't tend to feel that way, and some of them go through pretty much almost an entire lifetime, sort of with that filter over the world thinking, what kind of hope do I really have? And one of the biggest components of that you talk about in your book is the shame that they carry from having that experience in the first place. Tell us how someone can actually come to understand or recognize that that's what's actually clouding their vision and what they can do about it.
That's a great question and very loaded. That's what the workshop is about, basically, and the book covers that too, in that when we understand, when we can take the emotion out of it, this is where it gets tricky, because people get so attached and addicted to these false notions of I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I can't do that. If people only knew what happened to me. And then thus the shame is continues to keep that person down and thinking really inappropriately about life and about themselves, but it's so habitualized. So what I teach and train, and what I really is amazing to understand, is how the subconscious works, because as children are traumatized and abused, they only know who they are by how they are treated. They only know how to develop an identity by the reflection of the world that is given to them. So if they're being hurt and abused, automatically they're going to think, what is wrong with me? Why is this happening? I must not be lovable. Now, obviously it's not conscious thoughts, but it's the subconscious. All that gets embedded in the psyche, way down deep. And then as a child has to get through life, like I remember one incident of being terrorized and sexually abused that night, and I woke up in the morning, got my little uniform on, and walked off to school, and that was a terrifying experience for me. So just like for any child, what do? Well, the brain goes into action. There's a part of our brain, the amygdala, that really functions to help us with emotion. But what happens to the other part of the amygdala is it creates a 24/7 radar of watch out, be careful, watch out, be careful. So you fear everything. So that's embedded right away. But the other part of the brain is, well, hey, we need to survive this. Let's survive this. How are we going to survive this? So coping mechanisms begin to take place. They're genius at the time. They really help children cope as best they can. But those coping mechanisms get embedded. And as good as they are for children, they grow up with these coping mechanisms and dysfunctions of thinking. Because now as an adult, instead, those coping mechanisms become what trips them up in life. Because they're no longer needed. But they're so embedded in the brain and habitualized. And the better part of them, their beautiful essence of who they really are, is not seen for what it is and not appreciated that it's there. So that shame is like a veil. If I could put a picture like of a heavy veil over underneath of a heart. Our heart center is beautiful and its essence and it's who we really are. But until we lift that veil of shame, it feels dim. I don't believe anybody's really broken because people feel broken or whatever. They use those terminologies because it feels that way. I just think it's that our light, so to speak, is dimmed. And when an opportunity comes to a person in life of such pain and you wonder, instead of being the victim, take yourself out of the victim mode because, again, that's automatic. Why me? Oh, poor me, and they're doing this to me. Instead, say, how did I get here? How did I allow this to happen? What choices did I make to get to this point where I feel victimized? Start asking the right questions, and it helps lead you to the right answers.
Mary Alice, that's a very unique way to look at this, especially when it comes to trauma or abuse. How do you see, let's say, the light at the end of the tunnel as you hear the typical cliche? Or I remember a guest I had some time ago on the program who said another question you could ask would be, what possible good could come from all of this? And, even to ask a question like what you're suggesting here, that takes a lot of courage for somebody to be able to do that, doesn't it?
I think it can. I think courage is a good word. I think enlightenment. I think awareness. All those words are appropriate. Because my experience, I've been doing this for 21 years, working with women, and definitely there are a section of women who they just don't want to deal with it. They want to stay victims because they get something out of it. And I think the courage comes from, it's a silent, beautiful courage. It's moving past, it's pushing away that silent struggle, all that energy people put into covering up their hurt and abuse, and taking that energy and converting it into just even a mustard seed of courage and say and ask themselves the appropriate questions of, could this be why this is happening in my life because of my past? It's those small steps of courage of asking the right questions and really being objective with your life. Instead of living inside it so much, step out and look at yourself. I like to do that. It's one of the things I teach. It's like just visualize, like stepping out and looking at yourself. And is this the kind of life you really want to live? We are here on this planet to really, we are so capable and talented and have so much to offer, and yet we hide behind the pain so much. Like I said, it becomes habitualized. The pain is from the past. We have to keep the past in the past. But the brain, parts of the brain, the subconscious doesn't know that. So if we live, even if we live a pretend life like an actor or actress, when they practice as if they really, really, really are that character. They believe it with all their heart. And thus, if they're really good actors, become that character on screen where it's so believable. We get so caught up in the movie because these characters are so amazing. And it's a little bit like that for us. It's really, even if it's 5 minutes a day, just really take a step, believe who you are, think about the life you want to have and that you want to change. And I really believe that as that happens and you keep learning and growing, those steps will unfold before you. And whoever's listening to me right now, it's not by accident. I believe that with my heart. I believe there's a reason, and that's one of the things I'm talking about is when we become open, life is going to work for us too. It's going to bring opportunities for us to learn and to grow.
Now, I can imagine when you began to get your aha moments as you were growing and beginning to heal, that you started to see life as something that was there to really serve us, should be co-creators of that particular life. Has that been kind of your experience, do you think?
Oh, yes, I'm glad. Yes, that's a great insight. Yes, we are co-creators of our life. You see, I am a firm believer, too, that we don't get what we want, so to speak, in life. We get who we are. And so when we show up in life the best that we are, and really continually to work on that aspect and not judge what has happened to us or not judge who we are or that we feel bad about ourselves or that some of our coping skills have caused us pain in our life or caused pain for others, but to look at it objectively because we are what we think. And this is truth and this is science. We are what we think. And if you don't believe that, look around your life. Are you happy with it? Are you happy where you live? Are you happy in your job? Do you feel fulfilled with the person you're with? Or do you feel like you can pursue your hobbies and take that course you keep thinking about? You see, we need to keep moving past our boundaries of what holds us back. So our thoughts are so important and how we think about ourselves. It's so important. Dissect the words you tell yourself. We have 50 or 60,000 thoughts bubble up every day within us. That's just normal. That's just the subconscious just spews out up into our consciousness. And we don't think what the thoughts are. Like, in other words, we're not quite aware of them, but we'll feel them. So if many of your subconscious thoughts are one of anxiety or worry or shame or hurt or humiliation, then you really know you have a good indication through feeling of what is going on inside you. And we do have the power to change that. We absolutely. If you study the brain and neuroscience, which I've been doing for a long time, we believe and know that the brain, and can see it, actually, the technology is amazing. You can actually see neurons grow. It's just these patterns grow in our brain. So you can totally change the way you think about yourself or about others or about the world. And know that you're here to thrive. You're not just to survive. None of us are. And it's a passion that I have to help people through personal growth and development understand this concept.
Now, I know you just mentioned about how judgment really plays a very big role for a lot of people who have had these experiences, such as the one you described in your book with yourself. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, to get away from, because we tend to grow up as we get past childhood with that point of we should be doing this by this age, we should be that by this age, and it goes on and on about all these particular things that society tends to patch on us, making the assumption that we've all pretty much had regular, normal, healthy, happy childhoods. So I could see where someone going through this trauma, this experience as a child, would kind of step outside of the group and say to themselves, but I really don't belong here. I don't deserve to have a good life. And the question for me is, where do they get that particular language? Does that actually come from the experience itself?
It can. It depends, too, on the environment of how a child is brought up. Some children can have pretty decent households, and the sexual abuse or abuse occurs outside the home, so there's a mix. Or if the abuse is inside the home and the environment is just toxic, then that's kind of an automatic way to think that I'll never achieve there. They may see a TV show and see this happy family and think, oh, that's not my family, or I could never be that way, or it's too bad I could never have that. I mean, even our thoughts about money growing up, if all we hear is money doesn't grow on trees, or we can't afford that, or this, or that, you're going to grow up thinking poor and poverty thoughts. And yet they're just not true. It's just someone else's experience. So the judgments that come into us are because based on very childlike estimates of who we are. And like I said, as a child thinks, they're children and they don't know better. So it gets embedded and they take that into adulthood. So we have harsh judgments about ourselves and we talk severely about our own selves. You know, I went through a period of time, I remember as a teen, and just hating my body, hating myself, thinking I was too fat, or, whatever it was, I was just mentally, I would tell these horrible things to myself that I wouldn't even tell my worst enemy. And I had to learn that was just because, that was just a habit from when I was so little and being abused. That was the only thought pattern I had and knew, and yet it was false. So we need to even learn how to reparent ourselves and be with people who are uplifting and read books that are encouraging. You can change your thought pattern, and you don't have to be harsh on yourself or anybody else, because judgment inhibits our growth, and it inhibits our outlook and empathy toward other people. So if we limit and catch ourselves when we're judging ourselves or somebody else, that's a good thing. It's just stop and say the opposite. This is another thing we do in the workshop is when you come across a statement that you tell yourself, really stop and make yourself write it out or think it out the whole opposite. So instead of saying, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I always, mess things up, or whatever you say, you can say, you know what, I'm an incredible person with a great brain, and I forgive myself when I make a mistake, but I am going to continue on in my life, and I know that I'll be successful. It's just small things like that integrate into the brain, and every time you are conscious of it and aware, and you do that, it really does change the brain and help you focus on the better of who you are instead of these false judgments.
Now, Mary Alice, I find it interesting that people tend to find very creative ways, as you were talking about earlier in the program, to be able to cope with these experiences. And in saying that, even in this particular business that I'm in, where I get to sit and talk with wonderful, highly motivated, compassionate people like yourself, sometimes I'll have a guest come on the program and I hear from the producer, well, they're telling me they're extremely nervous. This is the first time they've ever done this. So from time to time when that does happen, what I'll do is after the interview is I might talk to them a bit afterwards just to ask them, so how was the experience for you? And they'll always say, well, that was a lot different than I expected it to be, and it was a lot easier than I thought it would be, a couple of things that I've heard. And so I'll say, so what made you believe it would be difficult? They said, well, it wasn't so much that I believed it would be difficult. That was maybe a small part of it, but here's what they actually say. I was afraid that I might make a mistake. Now, talk about fear in the context of what we're talking about here today and how that tends to be one of them coping mechanisms that people actually use and they believe is the ultimate crutch from not going through and doing what's necessary to come out on the other side like you have to get that light shining.
Yeah, that's a great insight as well. Because if you remember, I said earlier about the amygdala and how its function is to literally, it's 24/7 radar. Watch out, be careful. Maybe you should be afraid of that. Look out, And it's for our survival. It's for our safety. And that's a good thing because we need that. We need to be cautious. We need to be smart about things. But we need to connect that to our prefrontal cortex of our reasoning and our rationale, where we think through, where we say, that's scary, but why do I think that's scary? But a lot of people don't get that far to think, why am I afraid? What is that? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? So, in anybody who's been abused, that's going to be heightened. That part of the amygdala is going to be heightened. So they're going to be super afraid of different things or cautious or nervous. And what I think is so important is for people to work through that and I applaud the person that you were talking about who went ahead and did the interview, and they stepped out of their comfort zone. They were a little bit afraid or nervous, and yet turns out it wasn't that bad. Well, right there sets a precedence in the brain that, okay, well, see, that wasn't that bad. So the next time, it'll be easier for him. And it's the same for any of us. It's whatever we fear, really think about, well, why am I afraid of that? What is it about that really is setting me off to be nervous or anxious? And sometimes some people don't have an answer. Maybe this is a free-floating anxiety. Well, the free-floating anxiety is what is like swimming around in the subconscious. And we definitely can take control of that by taking the steps. And again, it goes back to those little steps of courage, those little lights of awareness that come on, and not judging yourself. So all those aspects, and those are great things you brought up, because all those aspects of don't judge yourself. It's okay if you make a mistake. A mistake is just a mistake. It's just a mistake.
We've talked about that quite a bit on the program, and now you can come to see that maybe our childhood school experiences have a lot to do with that, don't they?
Sure, it could be school, or it could be maybe parenting. Maybe parents were very strict or authoritarian and expected perfection, or, so yeah, it can come from anywhere, definitely.
So now let's talk about some of the steps that you talk about in your book that a person can take as they listen to this program now. And, of course, one of them will be visiting your website, which we'll give that web address out a little bit later here in the program. But what are some effective steps to take now? Many times, as I ask this question, is that I've heard on the program that you take a look at conventional talk therapy. That usually is the modality a lot of people are drawn to because they get the opportunity to at least be heard by someone. Mm-hmm. Preferably that person will be professional and objective to help guide them in the direction to where they want to go. But many times I've also come to understand that talk therapy isn't effective because basically what it does is it gets you to keep telling your story. And you're already doing that. You've already created a belief system because of the story you created about your experience. And now here you are sitting in an office recycling the story over and over again. And I can't see how that could be effective, especially in the short term, where it might give somebody at least the kind of hope to continue to move in that direction. But we're not saying that it's bad either. What steps would you encourage people to take?
Good question. I will say therapy is important, and it depends on the therapist. That's the thing. Someone really needs to connect with that therapist, so to speak, and they need to really feel trust. And depending on where they are in approaching their past, a good therapist can really help get them on the right track to think differently. Rehashing what goes on doesn't really help at all. In fact, it just keeps, reaffirming in the brain, keep going over this. So there are ways in which to approach it. That doesn't mean you have to spend a lot of time remembering. It's just important to remember the key points that are affecting your life negatively. Now, for me, it really helped me, but I knew there was more. There was something in me with a passion to keep learning. I have this, which is why I love helping people understand about the brain and about the subconscious and how it's all connected. And I really believe when people have that education, if they've never had therapy and they go to therapy, they're going to be a lot more targeted in what they want to work on. And if they've had therapy, like I did, it can only enhance the understanding and help you ask the really pointed questions to yourself as to why something keeps coming up in life. Why do I have these issues? And look, I know for me, I'm going to go to my grave always learning. I always have things that will come up. It doesn't mean I'm, 100%, this great person, this perfect person. I'm always still looking at things in my own life to change and to better. And then I'll always go to what part of my brain is making this happen. Why do I keep doing this? So we can break habits, definitely. And a person can definitely learn, when they learn the body-brain-mind connection, it does really help with whatever therapy they've had or will have.
Now, Mary Alice, you're saying something that I think is so valuable for our listeners out there, and you're talking about learned behavior.
Yes.
You can unlearn behavior, you can learn behavior. Now, right there, that's simple enough to know that. Now, I'll give you an example. There was someone I was working with some years ago who was interested in becoming someone who would be a healer, working with people in diet and nutrition, and, of course, pretty much sort of the same direction, but for different motivations than what you're doing. And so when it came time to do, for instance, things like filming, I said, well, are you prepared? Do you have, for instance, a cheat card that you can read off, things like that? She says, no. I'm better at winging it. And the fact is that she really wasn't.
Oh.
And it was wasting a lot of time, actually. But the point being is you could see that as she was doing what she was doing in front of the camera, that there was something in her that was really holding her back. And then, so as motivated it was to move in this direction with her way of putting herself out there, she basically got upset and says, I really just don't like talking in front of the camera. And my first thought is, well, what are we doing here then? But what I was trying to be clear with her in relation to what we're talking about here is, look, don't think of yourself in the same position as these people who are out there doing this, that are up there that everybody knows, that are out there on the talk circuit and so forth. These are all learned behaviors. They take practice, and you need the intention to want to do well and to want to be able to grow to do this. And I kept pounding it away. I said, these are all learned behaviors. I go out there when I do public speaking, and it's a very comfortable thing for me to do because I learned how to do it. I learned how to do it well from people who do it well. And that's exactly what you talk a lot about, too, in your book, Shatter, Shame, and Shine, is that learn behavior, find out the direction you want to go, and then learn and grow with the help of other people who can help you go in the direction that you want to go. Does that kind of make a lot of sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And two things I want to say is, one, good for her that she attempted it for, going after her dream. I hope she didn't stop there because we can change, and what you say is absolutely true. I found the best mentors and coaches in my own life that I realized I needed to have, whether they be at my good friends or somebody I sought out purposefully. Some of my mentors have been John Asraff, Bob Proctor, Jack Canfield, Marsha Weeder. Oh gosh, there's so many more. Les
Vincent
Brown.
Price?
Les Brown, it's huge. Pardon?
Mm-hmm. How about Vincent Price?
Vincent Price?
A man who could give you eloquence in his voice.
There you go. There you go. Yes, I did enjoy those movies when I was a kid. But Yeah, always look for people you admire or you want to emulate, and they have something, they have confidence. Because here's the bottom line. I tell people this because I had to learn it. You must love yourself. You must love and appreciate yourself and grow confidence in your strengths. Work on your weaknesses, but let your strengths unfold. And find the people you can resonate with who can teach you and guide you, whether it's through their book or you go to a conference that they have or videos on YouTube. Seek that out and learn and be a student of that very thing that you want to learn more of and grow strong in. And it's a beautiful thing. And I agree with you 100%. It's so important to seek out those people. And they're everywhere. I mean, even if you don't know them personally, you can spend time with them, again, through their books or through a conference they may have, or many of them have YouTube videos that they share their work on, whatever it is. It could be, whatever it is. One of my favorites is Les Brown, and he's all over YouTube. And I think anybody can benefit from what he shares, as well as Jack Canfield. These people are amazing human beings, and they're great. They're not just motivational speakers. I don't think they even like that said about themselves, because they really work on helping change people and transforming people's lives. And I want that too. That's what I desire too, because it's so, we can thrive. We can thrive, and that's why we're here.
Now, what I noticed in your book, Shatter, Shame, and Shine, and this is really good for the listeners to be encouraged to get a copy of this, is that you seem to have enough belief in others that helps them just in case maybe they don't have enough belief in themselves. Because
Yes.
I noticed through your book it became kind of cute, actually. I really believe in you.
Yeah.
And I applaud you for that, because sometimes that's what it takes, is someone that has enough of that to get somebody to be able to be picked up and at least taking that first step and that second and that third and that fourth step until eventually they're taking those steps on their own.
Yes, and that's what mentors do, and that's what I love to do, is to walk alongside women that I work with, just to see that and to instill that. I know I had people believing in me before I could really believe in myself.
Right.
It doesn't mean I'm perfect. It doesn't mean anybody is, but it's just we're here for a reason and a purpose. And when you believe that, it makes all the difference in the world, because every life matters. We all matter. And I always end all of my YouTube videos or whatever I'm saying with, you are amazing, you are a miracle, and you matter. And I can't tell you how many women write me back and say, oh my gosh, I've never heard anybody tell me that I matter. Do I really matter? And yes, everybody does. Everybody, without question. And it's finding what that is.
It's funny, I'm reminded of that Saturday Night Live skit. I think it was Robert Smalley, I think it was called. And it was that time that he had Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan, well, I'm pretty happy with my life. He says, no, you're much bigger than that, I'm smart enough, I'm good enough, and doggone it, people love me, sort of a thing. But, as corny as that seems, especially in that skit, there's so much truth to that. And as you were saying, learning to love yourself, learning to be more compassionate with yourself, And if you can at least get those down, then change becomes a lot easier, I would think.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. One of the hardest things for people who've been abused is to really love themselves. They think there's something wrong with that, or that they're not lovable. And there are many people who will say, well, just look in the mirror and practice saying, I love you, I love you. And it feels corny. It feels weird. It feels, you just want to go, forget it. This is stupid. But when there's eye-to-eye contact and the brain is firing off these neurons and you're telling yourself you love yourself just the way you are, just accept yourself just where you are. That's all. And then allow your understanding of the divine or God and your taking steps in the right direction to improve what you want to improve, because you are lovable, and everybody deserves to know that they are love. We hold the essence of love inside us.
I'm reminded again, you reminded me of another movie that I know a lot of listeners out there are familiar with, and that is What the Bleep Do You Know or We Know Anyway, right?
Right.
That scene with Marlee Matlin, who was doing that very same thing. She first is tearing herself up and saying how much she hates herself, and then all of a sudden begins to take, I don't know, maybe it was fingernail polish or whatever it was she used, and started writing love all over her body and beautiful and these things like that. And that falls in the same line with Dr. Emoto's work, the Japanese scientist who was showing how he flash freeze water in containers where he wrote specific words and would show the results that the power, the energy of these words had. And so as you were talking about earlier, Mary Alice, that the language we use and the language we tell ourselves and those words that are going on in the head, if people could begin just paying attention to those thoughts and change the language of those thoughts and believe that language that they've changed in their thinking, that it does really, truly transform and change their lives as much as it did for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Words are very powerful, and we throw them around like it's nothing, and we're sarcastic or we're mean to ourselves or mean to somebody else. They're very powerful, and they hold energy, and they do go out there, and they will come back to you. It's what I said earlier, we are our thoughts. So I agree with you very much so, that our words are very powerful, and it's very important to write a new script, if you must, for what you tell yourself. Yeah.
Now, Mary Alice, I understand that you do have a workshop that's going to be happening. Could you give our listeners an idea of the time and the place that this is going to be going on?
Oh, you're so kind. The workshop actually happened last week, and we're working on scheduling another one. And I do have an online workshop that we're going through now, but will be offered again soon, and that can be found at womensgrowthnetwork.com. I'm changing Change Your Aim, Change Your Life website, and moving it to womensgrowthnetwork.com. They're both active, though, so if I encourage anybody to go look at both of them, which is fine. Yes, the workshop will be, I wish I had a date, and I don't, but we're working on a new date for the new one.
Well, I'm sure if they go to your website, Change Your Aim, Change Your Life, one thing they will discover on there is your blog and vlog. So there are many videos where you're talking about a lot of the components that we're talking about here today. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. I do share what's in the book and components of the workshop, definitely. So they can get a lot of help or information, or maybe they're seeking a question answered, and they can find that in some of those videos. Mm-hmm.
Now, for our listeners, again, go ahead and give out both websites. They'll be pretty important there, but they'll both stay active, or is one going to eventually disappear?
They're both active.
Okay.
The Change Your Aim, Change Your Life I'd say go look at that, especially like you said, the blog area, and you can look at the videos that are up there. And then Women's Growth Network is a brainchild of mine. It's brand new, and it's going to keep growing. It's going to have interviews, and I want to start a podcast, and I want to have other, just keep current the workshop, the online workshop, and so it'll keep growing, and it's brand new, so what they see is what's there now, and then it's going to keep growing, and I'm excited for people to be on the ground floor with that.
Well, we've certainly been excited to have you as a guest on our program, showing that you've become the light and you're automatically giving others permission to be the very same thing, because you never know that once you turn that on, the special gifts that you're bringing to the world and how you can influence others as well. And we want to thank you for taking the time to be on our program today. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you very much, and as I've really enjoyed it, and you're a wonderful host. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And now where can people find your book?
It is on Amazon.
And that's Shatter, Shame, and Shine. Mary Alice Coleman, our guest today. Mary Alice, thank you again for being on the program today. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you. Have a great day.
You too. We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for tuning in. You can also discover more at beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50. We encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter to stay up to date on what's going on. You can also discover more by following us on Twitter at Beyond50Radio and also Facebook as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.